Welcome into this week's edition of the Research Corner. I'm Tony Mulvey, research analyst here at FreightWaves, joined by Joe Antashek. Joe, how's it going?
It's going great, Tony. How you doing? It feels like it's been a minute since we've done one of these.
It has been, 2 weeks now, I guess? I was out last week. I was out last week down in Florida, celebrating the sister's wedding. But we're back at it. Obviously, you had a pretty big survey that came out last week that we haven't had a chance to talk about it. So what better place to talk about it than right now? Obviously, taking a look at what's going on in the owner-operator space, kind of gauging their sentiment of the freight market. Joe, just kind of talk a little bit about the survey and kind of some of these results that we got from the survey itself.
Yeah, for sure. So the general idea was sort of that, right? We've been watching the market deteriorate in some pretty meaningful ways for carriers over the last 12 months. And we figured, the smaller carriers are probably a little bit more vulnerable to these changes. Not that the larger carriers are immune, but the smaller carriers, you think of the actual own authority, independent owner operator. It's they tend to not have the financial cushion that larger carriers have. They tend to be a little bit less diversified. So the thinking was let's figure out what they feel about this current market, and also, of course, get some numbers. So I think we have the first chart there that shows median gross revenue and then expenses. Right, here you go. So one of the interesting things that I learned from the survey was that median gross revenue from 2021 into 2022 actually grew for not just all respondents, but even the chunk of respondents. There's about a third that said they were considering leaving the industry because it was so tough. Those respondents also saw revenue growth year over year. So it wasn't revenue that was the problem with their net profit. It was expenses, right? It was fuel skyrocketing. It was equipment costs skyrocketing. And that really ate into their net profit. So it just painted a picture of, 2022 was not it was not the worst possible situation because for, the first half of the year, revenue was okay. But as the year progressed, rates went down, expenses were still high, and that left a lot of owner-operators really, really struggling.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at that chart and you see, I think it was about a 7% increase there in revenue. And then you see expenses increase 27%, right? So, I mean, you're talking, those margins really get squeezed, and that's for all respondents, right? I mean, if you look on those that said they're going to leave the industry, it's more severe than that. So I think the takeaway here is, yes, revenue was still okay, but if you couldn't manage those expenses, which in this case, a lot of those expenses were out of the control of these owner ops, right? I mean, you're talking fuel, you're talking insurance, right? These are the expenses that they just have to pay. It's an expense that they always have. It does change month to month. I mean, it's a variable cost that is very hard to forecast out, right? Because you're talking energy prices they're volatile and change all the time. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, you saw it, a 50% increase in diesel prices basically overnight in March of last year. So, I mean, you're talking about these expenses that they've had. But again, the revenue number was still okay. We'll pull up our next chart here and kind of takes a look at how owner-operators feel their business kind of doing, right? I mean, a vast majority say, hey, our business is sound, we're okay, no real issues there. But then you start to see, I look at that tail end, right? That second line from the far right that says they've already left their owner-operator space and signed on with a larger carrier. And that was about 5% of respondents. It's not really a surprise to see it that small, but to see that it is actually happening. It's something that we've talked about. It was mentioned in the article itself with the survey results, the BCO data, right? Mm-hmm. It's happening. It's just, I think some people and a lot of owner-operators, like I said, 47% think that their business is sound and things are going to be, they'll be able to weather this storm, even though it doesn't seem like maybe the worst declines are behind us. But if spot rates kind of settle in at this level for where they are, it's not this quick recovery that they may be hopeful for in the back half of the year.
Yeah, and the owner operator like class of the freight transportation industry is really interesting too, because you mentioned earlier that some of these expenses are unplanned. Like you can't really plan for some of these. Like you can't plan for like the war in Ukraine having an effect on fuel. You know what I mean? There are some things that you can't plan for, but it's really interesting. Like a handful of the people I talked to were really like. Sort of about this like personal responsibility, and I think that there's probably something to the idea that the owner operators who, one have had more experience, right, have been around the industry for a while and have weathered previous downturns, but also just those that have like kind of a laser focus on operational efficiency are going to be weathering this time a lot better. Like those people who know exactly what is coming in and going out. Like those people are the ones who are most likely to still be around come 2024, regardless of what happens this year.
Yeah, for sure. It's that understanding of what your cost per mile is. That way, when you have a rate and you know what that rate is, if it's a break-even lane, if it's a rate where, hey, you're going to make some money, or you're taking a loss, but maybe on the flip side, it puts you into a better position overall. Joe, real quick, one last chart. We got about 30 seconds. Obviously, still kind of negative sentiment towards profitability here in 2023, given the freight market, but I mean, a little better than what we saw in the previous year. Was that expected?
Yeah. So right. All that shows is that 2022 was worse than 2021, which everyone sort of knew. But more importantly, it shows that owner-operators expect 2023 to be worse than the both of them. Right, if you're not on great footing now, this year is not necessarily going to be easier. Hopefully, most owner-operators can get through the year.
Absolutely. Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining me today on this week's edition of the Research Corner. We'll be sure to check in with you again next week. Right now, we'll take a quick break, but we'll be back with more Freight Waves Now.